Hey everybody, I thought that I would create a quick video and go over one of the readings from last week, and it was actually the Excelsior College's embedded Toulmin article by Mariah Jackson called Every Little Girl Wants to Be a Princess, right? And it's about beauty pageants. And if you remember, if we're going to do a Toulmin argument, it's actually a fairly straightforward type of academic essay. You can see that this one is set up in Emily style, and I'd like to talk to you about some of the features that are in this. And then you can let me know if you have any questions after that. There's also in the same week from last week, Nicole D'Amata's, or from our last week of classes, from Nicole D'Amata's essay as well, and does sort of the same thing. I don't always 100% agree with all the labels, and you'll see why in this introduction, but this is just under 5 pages, so it's the right size academic article, and I'll just sort of give you a tour of it, and again, let me know if you have questions. So this one starts off saying beauty pageants have become a staple in American culture. And you'll note that this was published in 2014. And so maybe we can make an argument that they're less important than they have been before. But certainly in 2014, I don't know if the trend had gone down, right? Winners of pageants such as Miss America are icons, representations of the ideal woman. Well, they're supposed to be, right? So society says, so the author is disagreeing with that. And you can kind of get a sense that, remember, introductions have warm-up information, they may have a hook detail, and then they end with thesis statement. The pageants are just as glitzy, the competition is just as fierce. The difference is that these contestants are the miniature model. They are child beauty queens. And so we're shifting from the adult version of it to like toddler pageants and things like that. The world of child beauty pageants has become a source of fascination as well as contention in our society. Networks, here's a hook detail. Networks such as TLC and WTV have produced hit reality TV shows featuring the munchkin-sized divas. And that's a little bit of pathos, right? So if we're going back to Aristotelian argumentation, the word choice here is a little bit more slick, a little bit more slangy, has a little bit of attitude. So you can kind of see that in the hook detail, that there are these TV shows, and you can even enhance this hook detail by naming like toddlers and tiaras, right? But one can't help but wonder, how can parading children on stage like show ponies be a positive thing? That's one of those rhetorical questions that you often see in introductions. Here's the opinion of the author. There are 3 potential thesis statements. The truth is, it is not an opinion, it's an argument. I would argue that here's your thesis statement. Beauty pageants are not a healthy activity for children because, so are not, is that the opinion, right? Thesis because of reasons. They force young girls to act like little adults. They exhibit age-inappropriate sexuality and have negative body image and mental health problems later in their lives. So those are those 3 reasons that should be focus areas of body paragraphs. This children are the future of society, I feel like is pretty weak sauce, if you want to go slangy. I think you could say even those who don't have children should be concerned about the direction of the culture that we live in. But the children of the future of society is one of those just blanket statements that seems pretty vague and meant to be pathos-oriented, but is not as effective, right? Now, this is where the general thesis usually goes. It's that last sentence of the introduction, and they say, Mariah says, just because child beauty pageants are socially acceptable does not mean they should be. Our culture needs to eliminate them, at least in their current form. So 2 sentences that the Excelsior says, hey, this is the claim. And yeah, it's sort of like it's been stated multiple times. I would rearrange this with this, and I would take out the first half of that sentence. And so if Mariah was in my class, that would be my advisement. But as far as a Toulmin paper is concerned, look, they say here the writer presents the main claim, and we say the claim is the thesis. The main claim is the thesis. And if you look at Nicole's essay, you'll see that Nicole has main claim, which is thesis, and then subsidiary claims that this popularity is relatively recent. You could say that that's a subclaim. Topic sentences, if they're designed well, work well because they tie back to the reasons in your thesis and so forth. But remember, part of that first triad of Toulmin, claim. You need to have a claim by the end of that first paragraph to do well on this assignment, and that does mirror an Aristotelian argument. Look at this. America's first televised child beauty pageant was held in 1960 in Miami. Florida, and only aired on local television station by Hidbolt Stoley. So that's a piece of data. I don't think any of us knew that. So data are grounds. That's the term that Toulmin uses. And so if you were to highlight this section, say this is a paper you wrote, and say, oh, here's my grounds. The grounds are the research that you tend to find, right? Then here's another borrowed piece of data. Today, the mini beauty pageant industry is a multi-billion-dollar a year endeavor by Giroux. This is MLA style. You can tell they have page numbers, but no copyright years. So the only difference in the in-text citation would be adding a copyright year now. This is what we call synthesis writing, where you have two pieces of data before you have the unpacking in that discussion. And as a matter of fact, we actually have more. We have another quote from Giroux. You'll notice that Giroux is mentioned at the beginning of the sentence this time. That's fine. That adds for nice fluidity and flow. You don't always have to tack your source on the end of a sentence, but you'll notice that there are multiple pieces of data from quote and like a number done in the approximate through paraphrase. All this is fine as far as documentation is concerned. We've got a warrant at the end of this. This one isn't labeled. I'll show you when that's labeled in just a minute. But this says that kind of simplicity does not exist in today's pageant world. This is the understanding of the author interpreting past versus present. Instead, Mariah could say, today it's a fierce competition for monetary prizes and the grand supreme title. The thing that I would caution her about is shifting to first person plural. This could say, this is the world Americans are putting their toddlers into, while instructing them to, quote, strut their stuff. I mean, that's exhibit age-appropriate sexuality if we're telling them to strut their stuff. And there are ways to add more. This is a slightly shorter paper, but you could certainly add a little bit more discussion. Remember, the warrant is this sort of unspoken connection between the data that you've collected, your grounds, and the claim. And so, as I've mentioned in class, not everybody feels the same way about a piece of data or would interpret it the same way. So what is the unspoken interpretation that you feel about that piece of data? Why are you presenting this piece of data? This data is important because works great, or this means that, my favorite phrase of all time, to introduce a warrant. The next paragraph says the hit television shows are another new aspect. Shows like Little Miss Perfect or Toddlers and Tiara. So now we have some specific data here. We've got a quote from TLC. The writer presents grounds. Remember, grounds is just more data, so that's an example of some grounds. Networks defend the show, saying they're just documentaries. But then we've got the sentence clearly. You're shifting to opinion here. Parents are part of the morbid attraction of, obviously, TLC doesn't say that in the data. That's the interpretation. How would those children, by the way, get to the pageant without the parents' involvement? How would they afford the hairdressers, the clothes, the dance lessons, all of the props that they use? So there's a way to draw this out, and what the writer's saying is this is why this is all important. It's that parents are also involved. It's something that was unspoken. It's not that this is just a documentary, but the footage shows it's hard to deny that children are being exploited. That's an opinion based on the data. So you can think about warrants explaining the data in a way that would connect to the claim. And the claim in this argument, in this paper, is that these pageants should be banned. Well, one of the reasons unspoken is that parents are part of that attraction. They're part of the problem. One additional way, so we can kind of sequence all these different reasons, is that pageants exploit children in a sexual manner. And then we've got an article by Mark Davidson, and we got a quote from him, again, more grounds. And you'll notice that not every instance of grounds or of data is highlighted. And when you write your own Toulmin paper, you do not have to highlight every instance, but just show me around your paper. Give me some evidence that you've got some warrants, that you've got a main claim, that you've got the grounds, the data. That's that first triad, and that's what I'll be looking for. For every paper that needs to pass, we'll need to have the first triad. So as we scroll through this short essay, you see a couple of examples of grounds, a couple of examples of warrant, and that makes sense because you want them embedded. You want grounds, you want data in every single paragraph. You want authors named in every single paragraph. One thing that I haven't had time to tell the class is that I'm not always the biggest fan of embedding titles of articles in body paragraphs for undergraduates. You could just say Mark Davidson provides in his USA Today article that these pageants commercially flaunt kids' bodies. So you could provide that information without naming the title. I find that the title of articles can sometimes get misconstrued for dialogue or borrowed phrasing from a source, and sometimes it's quote unquote filler information. You don't really need it. On much longer documents, maybe it's worthwhile, but you don't need it. So here's another piece of grounds. Here's another warrant. Now, backing's per the second triad. Remember, backing, qualifiers, and rebuttal. Backing is secondary information that additionally supports a point. You probably wouldn't need it if you were in a direct debate, but in essay writing, you can go a little bit longer. And here's an example of backing. Sexualizing children and preteens is wrong because it puts them at risk for more serious physical harm. So what's another? This is almost a slippery slope argument, but there's actually data to support this. That leads to additional areas of concern for parents. And so if I was to make an argument on the death penalty, for example, and I wanted to say that we should use it more in cases of particular types of assault, I could say that the victim for life has PTSD, and suffers so long, and so does their families, and that combined suffering, the combined community suffering should equate to a death sentence for the criminal. I actually believe that, but I'm just saying that you can have a direct piece of data, and that could be like a victim impact, but then you could have additional pieces of data, we call that backing, to provide a little bit more scaffolding or support. It's just an additional, oh, I see how that could also be the case. This is something that we didn't talk about much in Aristotelian arguments. We're really straightforward, and now you're just going to come up under the article, under a couple of your points, and be, and in addition to that, provide a little bit of extra related data. So this will revolve around some good academic research. You can see that, again, some of the terms in this text are a little bit, I don't want to say salacious, that's not the right word, but are very heavy-handed, like pedophiles and kiddie porn. Be careful with your phraseology. As writers in 112, I'd say maybe this is a good example of a Toulmin 111 paper. As writers in 112, I want you to control your tone for as high ethos, credibility as you can. You pathos at a minimum. Okay, then they move into the Jean-Benet Ramsey case, and they make a connection. This is related to that backing that supports the sexual exploitation angle, and they draw it out some more. Okay, we've got even additional grounds in the section. Remember, grounds, it's just your data. It can appear in every section, from your main arguments to your counterpoint arguments. Now, the rebuttal is just a term that Toulmin used that mirrors or mimics the counterpoint. You've done this in 2 papers now. You've done a counterpoint in your Aristotelian essay with at least 1 paragraph, and some of you had 2. And you did an entire section early in the paper for your Rogerian essay. So think of the rebuttal as, what do people who support child beauty pageants, what are their thoughts about that? So we have some data that's related to that, and the section would be called the rebuttal. So this is really nothing new. A lot of these features that Toulmin talks about are things we've already done, maybe with different labels. Okay, and then let's see, back to main claim, and I'm wondering, I would have to, I'm about to run out of time here, so I only have a minute left. But if you scroll through some of these little comments, let's see if we can quickly find a qualifier word. Let's see. I'm looking for it. I see most everything here. Qualifier words in this article would be something like, our culture needs to eliminate most child beauty pageants, or eliminate child beauty pageants for children under 12. That under 12 would be considered a qualifier. So that's how you could add a quick qualifier. Words like many, most, a lot, some, often. Those types of words show quality. Now, I want to do a quick scan of the references. This is a newspaper. The Kenyon Review is an academic journal article. Social Text is an academic journal article. This is a magazine, but here's an academic journal article. And eating disorder is another one. So there are plenty of academic research here. So having USA Today and having Good Housekeeping are okay. I would expect you to play around with those sources and do some good research, create a Toulmin argument, and let me know if you have any questions.